When a child goes missing, the story that follows is heartbreaking, and the details are almost always tragic. Today, we're taking a look at some of the most famous kidnapping cases that captivated the world with trial attorney and legal analyst Misty Maris. Misty, thanks for being back with us. We're going to start with 6-year-old Eitan Pates, who vanished from a New York City street back in 1979 and whose body was never found. As a legal analyst, what do you think makes this case so compelling, even after all these years?
So this was such a mysterious case because Eitan disappeared into thin air. There were no leads. He was also one of the first children to be featured on a milk carton, which was the only way to publicize a missing child at the time. This really changed the landscape of America. Parents were now so terrified to let their children out of their sights, and it had a profound impact on that. And what's also so crazy about this case, it took 30 years to get a break. And this only happened because Pedro Hernandez's brother-in-law remembered a story that he had told that was disturbing, reported it to police. Hernandez then said he did it, he confessed, and that reignited interest in this story.
Yeah, it changed, I think, parenting in the sense that it changed how people thought about protecting their own children, letting them play out in public. What's the latest in the case?
So in 2015, Hernandez stood trial. There was one holdout juror who did not believe the prosecution proved their case beyond a reasonable doubt, so it resulted in a hung jury. But then in 2017, he was convicted, is serving 25 years to life. The reason that was such a difficult case for the prosecution the first time around, it's based on solely circumstantial evidence. There's no forensics. It's 30 years later. So luckily, the Pates family got justice, but it took a very long time to get there.
Okay, we're going to move on now to this next story. Jaycee Dugard was only 11 years old when she was kidnapped in 1991 and held captive for 18 years. She gave birth to 2 daughters in captivity before miraculously escaping in 2009. What can you tell us about the mindset of her captors, Philip and Nancy Garrido, and other predators out there that are like them?
So there's such a common theme with the captor couple. So you have Philip Garrido. He says angels have been telling him to do this, that he's following the directives of these angels. But a lot of people are skeptical. Is that just to lay the foundation for an insanity defense? And then on the flip side, you've got Nancy. Now she says, I was under Philip's control. She's almost making an argument of Stockholm syndrome or something that takes away her responsibility in the case. But again, a lot of people call a foul on that. But what's so unbelievable in this case is that you have Jaycee Dugard there living in the backyard of their house in tents, in this secret backyard, and giving birth to a child. And guess what? Philip Garrido, he was on parole for child abuse. And the fact that the parole officers never saw anything, never took action, is actually unbelievable. That resulted in a $20 million settlement with the state of California.
Wow. We're going to move on now to 3-year-old Madeline McCann, who made international headlines when she vanished without a trace while on vacation with her family in Portugal. Now, this case has truly baffled investigators. Misty, what can you tell us?
There's still no information to this day, Jesse, and that's what makes this case so extraordinary. There's been a lot of speculation. People have said maybe it was gypsies, maybe she was sold into some sort of child human trafficking ring. The other theory is that it's a robbery that was botched, gone bad, and she ended up being taken to that. But there's no facts, no evidence to support those theories. At first, the parents were the people that law enforcement looked at. Since then, they've been cleared. Now the story is still ongoing. Police are still looking for a lead. There's a mysterious woman in purple that law enforcement believes may hold the key to this case. But as time goes on, it becomes less and less likely we're going to get answers. But think about Eitan, think about Jaycee. You can get answers even 30 years later.
It's
so we have to keep up hope.
After all this time, it just seems to be getting more and more mysterious too. What is it about the case you think has intrigued so many people, not just in America, worldwide?
Worldwide, because her parents have said, look, there's no evidence that any harm ever came to Madeline. They hold out hope that she's still alive. Interestingly enough, there's been over 8,000 alleged sightings of Madeline in 101 countries. So it's absolutely keeping the story alive. Programs like this, keeping this in the forefront, may help us get that break we need to solve this case.
Okay, moving on, we're going to talk about Elizabeth Smart, who was 14 years old when she was abducted from her bedroom in Salt Lake City back in 2002, and against all odds, was found alive. What do you find most disturbing about this kidnapping?
There are so many disturbing facts, but one of the facts that's so disturbing. So So Elizabeth Smart was held in captivity. She was chained to a tree. She was beaten. She was raped daily. In addition to that physical captivity, she also endured such psychological trauma. Because in this case, this is so much different than some of the cases we spoke about. They would go out in the open. They would walk around, travel, but Mitchell had such a hold on Elizabeth because he said, if you ever say a peep, if you ever scream, if you ever do anything, try and run away, I'm going to kill your whole family. And that type of psychological pain that she suffered during that time makes this an extraordinary case.
All right, now Mitchell's wife, Wanda Barzee, has an upcoming parole hearing scheduled. What can you tell us about that?
So what's interesting in this case is Wanda Barzee, Mitchell's wife, now, they were both charged with the same crimes, and ultimately she could have been held equally culpable. But instead, what she did was she testified against him. She got a lesser sentence with the ability to get parole. She stood on that defense we talked about before, Jesse, that she was under Mitchell's control, that the actions they weren't hers, they were his, and she couldn't escape that. But now that she's up for parole, the facts of this case are so unbelievable. It'll be interesting to see what happens. But interestingly enough, she's going to say she's older, she's in her late 70s. The big factor in a parole hearing is, are you a threat to society? Well, notably, she did a jailhouse interview last year where she said God had directed her and Mitchell to abduct Elizabeth Smart and talked about the case. That's going to be detrimental. Her whole stance of why she should get parole is that she's sorry. She can't believe she was ever a part of this. That could really undercut her chances.
All right, Misty, let's now switch to the high-profile kidnappings of 3 Ohio women, Michelle Knight, Amanda Berry, and Gina DeJesus. What makes this case so extraordinary in your opinion?
So these 3 women were captured and they were chained to their beds. They were raped and beaten almost every day. And in this case, it was Amanda Berry, who we heard in a 911 call, who was ultimately able to escape when she saw the opportunity and got out of that house, saving the other 2 captors. Other facts of this case that make it truly just so heartbreaking. Amanda was forced to give birth to the child of her captor in a baby pool. One of the other women was impregnated 5 times by her captor, but each time he beat her and starved her till she miscarried those pregnancies. So that's the type of brutality we're talking about in this case.
These are terrible stories and unbelievable cases. Misty, I want to thank you so much for being with us to shed some light on them.